is different, right? We were the first underrepresented minority-owned investment fund at Cornell,
Hmm.
and it's over 200-year history. Yeah, we talked to over like 80 students in our initial round. I wouldn't say it was taxing. It was fun. Like, you have to, one, be deeply committed to it because this is your actual money that you're investing. When you lose money, it's gonna hurt.
Welcome back, guys. This is Ebenezer.
What's good, guys? This is Mohammed. Today we have Cheick Camara. Cheick is a junior in Dyson. He is co-president of BlackGen and co-founder of Fello. Cheick, anything you want to add to that? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's truly an honor to just be on this podcast. I'm really excited for the conversation that we're gonna have. But a little bit of background about me. So my name is Cheick Camara. I'm a junior in the Dyson School studying finance. And, I've always just been really inclined to business and entrepreneurship in general. And, we can dive into that later, but, that kind of journey into entrepreneurship and finance is really what has shaped a lot of how I view, my Cornell experience.
It's beautiful to hear. Um, all three of us are really good friends, known each other for a pretty good amount of time, and this conversation is going to get really deep, and I hope people are able to take some good gems from this, because I know ourselves will. And so let's dive into your background a little, Shaq. Tell us about where you're from, how that's influenced you, and what you've taken from that.
Yeah, so I was born in Atlanta, Georgia, but 2 months after I was born, my family decided to relocate to Harlem, New York, which I spent a predominant amount of my time just growing up there. And I come from very humble beginnings. Son of two immigrant parents from Mali. They came to America with maybe $20 in their pockets, and just a large, ambitious dream to fulfill that, like, quote unquote American dream, and just to give us the opportunity to excel in any field that we'd want. And so growing up, I kind of always had this very humble perspective on just like life, but more broadly, I've also, like, in tandem with that, I've been super ambitious in that I've seen that America has so many opportunities. I just want to make sure that I can capitalize on all of the opportunities presented and make the most out of it. And so throughout school, like especially in high school, I really focused on getting good grades, making sure that I was setting myself up to get into a good school post high school. Eventually, graduated a valedictorian of my high school, and then ultimately became the first student in over 12 years from that high school to get into an Ivy.
Well,
Um, and then, ultimately got to Cornell. Funny story, because I came into Cornell as a biology major. I was on the pre-med track. I wanted to be like a neurosurgeon. That whole, you know, shebang.
Yeah, no, I could definitely relate with that for sure. I think we might have talked about this in the past, but for me, when I in high school, it was me watching Grey's Anatomy. Um, and I was like, yo, look at all this drama, look at all this saving people's lives. It seems so glamorous, and so I could definitely share that. But before we dive into Cornell, let's dive into Harlem, man, and what your experience was like in high school. I know you just mentioned that you were a valedictorian. Um, so specifically on your high school, and some of the things that you kind of did there to get to where you are today, to kind of set the floor for the audience of your background and who you were in high school and who you are now.
Yeah, definitely. Great question. So I went to a public high school in the South Bronx. The high school didn't have many resources, was very low funded, school, kind of like, a similar situation as many of the schools in the South Bronx and even in parts of Harlem. However, I was really fortunate to just be presented the opportunity of SEO scholars, and so that program ultimately strives to close this education gap between minorities and affluence, and white students. And so we ultimately, like, I was spending every weekend, like Saturdays from 8 a.m. to like 8 to 5 p.m. doing extracurricular, like, academic assignments, like whether it be math, English, critical reading, critical writing. I also spent like a couple of my weekdays also doing more of that educational training.
Is that part of the program?
Yeah, so that's a big component of the program, just to make sure that they can feel like they can close that academic gap, um, with these students from under-resourced backgrounds. So I took full advantage of that. It really helped out in terms of like SAT prep, doing well in my schoolwork in high school, and then also, it looked really good on college applications. Aside from SEO scholars, I also, did decently well in my SATs, and so at the high school, I saw that there was no SAT prep
Yeah.
resources, anything like that. And so I figured, I could, potentially just put together a club where I can teach some students SAT math and kind of help them,
Mm.
improve their scores. And then on top of that, just like outside of academics, I'm big into just like being a hustler. I got really big into the whole like sneaker reselling and Supreme. And so I was literally a school kid by day and hustler by night, just like flipping Supreme and sneakers and stuff. It even got to the point where I like had a friend build me a bot. That bot was really really good, and the business kind of just took off. And then I also just like throughout high school, kind of looking back at it, I realized that I was always so focused on the future that I didn't quite, enjoy the present and enjoy all of the elements of high school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just always focusing on the next step, which was college, and ultimately career, but not fully enjoying the friendships and the relationships that I built. And that's one thing that I kind of look back and wish I had done differently. But now I know. So that's one of the big things that I've been focusing on in college, and we can talk about that more later on.
One thing that I like from what you mentioned, you seem to recognize the opportunity that you have, by being born in America, right? And a lot of people might recognize that, right? They might recognize that their parents immigrated for them to have an opportunity, but it's different recognizing it and actually taking that opportunity. And I don't know if you were very intentional about it as a high school student. You might know it, you might have known it subconsciously, but it seems like even with school, but also you said when you were hustling on the side as well, and also thinking about the future, you seem to have like really understood the kind of opportunity that you were given, and you seem like you wanted to take it, and I really like that about what you said.
Yeah, like we're really lucky. Just like like we're really privileged in many ways. And
Yeah,
there's a lot of people all across the world who are literally begging for the things that we have. And
Exactly.
so, if we have them, why not, fully take advantage of it and make sure that we can multiply it and then ultimately give it back.
Exactly. I think this kind of reminds me of a convo that Mohammed and I were having a couple of days ago. Although in America there is a 1%, America itself is a 1% compared to the rest of the world.
mhm,
So, that kind of, I don't know how we got there, how that happened, but kind of really reminds me of that. And so it's cool that we're kind of covering that, because that's a motivation for me too, and I believe it is for the rest of you guys. Um, but it's really interesting because schoolboy by day, hustler by night, that hasn't changed. It's still the case. Um, so let's transition a little bit and talk about Cornell a little. So you kind of mentioned it a little bit when you got to Cornell, but how was it when you first came to Cornell? I know you did PSP. Maybe talk about that, some of your previous experiences.
Yeah, I mean, so even getting into Cornell, I don't like, I don't even think my parents knew it was kind of like a big deal a little bit. Like they were like, "Oh, that's a good college. Wow, that's great." I don't think they really knew it was like Cornell, and so I kind of say that just to say that coming in, I didn't even fully know what Cornell was.
I feel you.
Like I had, nobody in my family had gone to, um, an Ivy League institution,
Hmm.
and so I didn't fully know what to expect. My high school was also predominantly minorities, Black, Latinx students, and so I just have a whole mix of emotions, and then on top of that, there was also an element of imposter syndrome
Mm.
because I was fortunate enough to graduate valedictorian in high school, but and then get into Cornell. But then, a lot of my teachers, they would say, like, Cheick, like, Cornell is a very difficult school. They would say things like,
Yo.
you were a big fish in a small pond.
Mm.
That was a very common saying, and that's just to say that, okay, like, you were smart in this school, but like when you go to Cornell, you're a small
Mm,
fish in a big pond,
mm,
right? There's going to be people 10 times as smart as you, 10 times hardworking, and all kinds of sorts. So there's a really big mix of emotions. But
Hmm.
then coming in, I like PSP was super helpful. Doing that pre-freshman summer program with just being able to build relationships with people, come into the regular semester with friends already, and then like already knowing how to kind of navigate the campus, and just small things like knowing which dining halls are the best, and which locations are the best study spots. So that was a really good reassurance as to why I'm here at this place, at this institution, and why I deserve to be here. But throughout that whole process, I was pre-med, and
Completely
so
different route.
yeah, it was kind of very different from like my actual passions and things that I actually enjoyed and did for
mm,
fun,
Mm.
like all of the hustles and stuff. And so coming in, I got into Cornell as a biology major. Wanted to be a neurosurgeon. I thought it was pretty cool. I said, why not? Watched a couple of Grey's Anatomy episodes, and this is what I wanted to do. Um, but that wasn't the case. I did well in my pre-med coursework, but I just wasn't as passionate about it. Like with business and finance, I'm thinking about those things a lot. Like
Mm.
I like to think about the markets just for fun. Like nobody has to push me
mm,
to do that.
Hmm.
Whereas with pre-med, like I enjoyed science and math broadly, but like how can I just enjoy things that I can put into practice immediately,
Hmm.
mm,
Hmm.
right? With biology, I couldn't really see myself putting that into practice immediately, so it was very difficult. Whereas like finance, learning about the markets, I'm immediately able to
yeah.
invest and kind of build on that knowledge 9:30 a.m. to
Yeah.
4 p.m. every weekday. Um,
I think that's the beauty of Dyson, and I think I've been saying this to you a lot too. Like, it's really awesome that in the business major and in the business school at Cornell, the things you learn, like, they're so practical. They're so practical in the fact, like you said, you literally wait. I see you do this. You help me do this. You advise me in this. 9:30 every morning, even before class. That's that's what you do, and so it's it's interesting because the curriculum is built in that way. But we could dive into the Dyson and the rest of the Cornell community later.
yeah, for
Um,
sure.
did I think I cut you off on something earlier?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I guess the toughest part about making that like having that realization that I didn't want to do pre-med was actually facing the harsh reality that I would have to tell my parents, like, yo, I don't want to be a doctor. Like,
Yep.
your son is not going to be the first doctor in the family. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I kind of like made the switch without fully telling them.
When did that happen? Was that freshman year?
After my first semester, freshman
Oh,
year.
wow.
Yeah,
That's a good
so
time.
yeah,
That's
really good time. I made the decision. It was quick,
Yeah.
and then I had the rest of my college experience to just do what I wanted to do.
this kind of makes me think about me before I even got to college. Um, my parents are extremely supportive of what I do and everything, but as you said, I think this tends to be a thing within African parents in general. I don't know, Mohammed, you kind of just you didn't have a similar experience, but I think you can kind of agree to it too. But before I even got to Cornell, my thing was my dad wanted me to be a doctor, and so like Cornell wasn't even in the picture to begin with. It was just like, what schools are out there that have accelerated pre-med opportunities for you to pursue?
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
Cornell came out of nowhere for me. So I could definitely resonate with you making that transition without having that influence or having that thing to think about. But like I was saying, it's a pretty perfect opportunity and perfect timing that you did that. How did you do that? What was the steps you took to get
Yeah,
there?
the steps. So, first was just identifying what I was actually passionate about. And, that was straightforward for me because I was able to look back at my past experiences and see they're all very entrepreneurial, all business related. That's what I like doing for fun. And so, that was my passion. So,
Hmm.
one, identifying the passion. Two, yeah, like taking the actual steps to make the transfer. So I started looking into the Dyson transfer process
Mm.
and figuring out the best classes to take in order to prepare for that. And then as well as speaking to an advisor in Dyson to just learn more about the process in general. And then three was also just joining clubs, joining business finance related clubs. That was super helpful because these clubs provide so much practical experience as well as the networks, like the networks that can provide you with the mentors and people who can actually just guide you along this path.
Hmm.
And so I'd say those were three main steps, and I guess a fourth was just like confronting my parents and telling them I didn't want to do this.
Big step.
Yeah, biggest step right there.
Now you mentioned talking to advisors and joining clubs and how that's important. Um, and I feel like not a lot of people take advantage of those. Like you use that, for example, when you transitioned to Dyson. But how have you used that even after joining Dyson? Like, do you talk to your advisors and stuff like that?
Yeah. So advisors, not so much, just because I talk to a lot of my student mentors more. I
Mhm.
feel like they can relate more to my direct experience a little bit more.
Hmm.
But advisors definitely, like if I have a college specific question, like I'll happily set up a meeting with them. And then as far as clubs and organizations, like yeah, even after joining Dyson, like I still joined some finance orgs to gain more experience, meet new people, and just build those relationships. Like I feel like that's a really important element of college in general.
Hmm. And I think this is a beautiful transition to clubs on campus, one of which is BlackGen Capital. And it's interesting because even this wasn't so far after your transition that you kind of went on to start this organization. Let's talk a little bit about that. What did that process look like, and what went into making BlackGen what it is today?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So when making that transition, I joined some clubs, some business clubs at Cornell, and it became very apparent that there was a severe lack of diversity issue. This was it's getting a lot better now that we're in
Mhm.
2021. But when I was a freshman, like all of these clubs, a lot of them didn't have any people of color, which is really, really shocking.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so even as a freshman, not not really having like business acumen, like in terms of like the books,
Mhm.
I it was immediately like super intimidating to try to join those orgs.
Mm.
Facing the fears of just imposter syndrome, knowing if you're good enough, knowing if you're gonna fit, and then even if you do fit, like knowing that you'll be accepted and be able to produce good work.
Mhm.
Um, and so after joining some of those orgs, I figured like, and then also like throughout that process from like freshman spring to sophomore year, I was just building up a lot of finance experience, doing a lot of self-taught stuff, as well as doing internships and programs at some of the banks. I was lucky enough to do a freshman enhancement internship at Morgan Stanley, which provided a nice foundation for the finance fundamentals. And then also just like reading textbooks and guides and stuff. And then
Mhm.
my sophomore fall, uh, I Aramis came into the picture, and we both just sat down one day and figured and just talked about these issues. Like, there's really no Black or Latinx people in these orgs, which was so sad. Aaron was in another top finance org. He
Mm.
was the only person of color in that org. I was in another organization, only person of color there.
Mhm.
And this was just shocking to us because, like, we knew so many talented, like, smart Black and Latinx students who wanted to go into this field of finance, who wanted the same resources, the networks, the
Yeah.
knowledge that the Cornell finance clubs provide.
Mhm.
And so there was an immediate gap there that we needed to fill somehow.
Mhm.
So we came together and built BlackGen Capital as a way to bridge the access gap between talented Black and Latinx students who want to go off who want to learn about financial literacy, and then ultimately go off into the financial services industry as well.
Mhm.
When you started BlackGen, you saw this big need for financial literacy education for underrepresented students. So like it's a big gap that you're trying to fill, and you're trying to create a whole new organization. What are the challenges that came with that, and how did you deal with that? And can you tell us about the whole process of starting a whole new organization on campus?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I'd say challenges definitely just having this vision. Um, I was just talking about this the other day with somebody, but having this vision that is kind of is different, right? We were the first underrepresented minority owned investment fund at Cornell.
Mhm.
And it's over 200-year history, right? And
Yeah.
so kind of setting out that vision, and then other people kind of not fully understanding that the vision will soon become a reality. So that was definitely a challenge. I'd say another challenge was just um, just making sure that our brand was intact, and it was something that it was not just, oh, this is another club on campus, another group of students trying to get together, but
Mhm.
this was like we wanted to make monumental change for the Black and Latinx community. And so we wanted to exemplify that in our brand and in our marketing initiatives, to make sure that the community and the people who saw us, they knew that we were serious and deeply passionate
Mhm.
about solving this issue. That was definitely another challenge. Logistical challenges, just like the whole club formation process, like finding an advisor to sign off on things. Um, setting up like the gift funds and knowing how to use that, as well as setting up the nonprofit entity as well.
Got you. So for the people listening out there that are interested in tackling a problem that they see plaguing the campus, and it being a way for, and the best way being creating an organization, what are some of the lessons that you've learned in this process that you definitely advise students to kind of take into account?
Yeah, biggest lesson definitely is like your team is the most important aspect, hands down. You can have the best ideas in the world, but at the end of the day, it's all about the execution.
Hmm.
And your execution as an organization heavily relies on the leadership team behind it.
Hmm.
So when building out this team, when building out BlackGen Capital, we knew that our team couldn't just consist of our close friends and buddies and bros and sisters and stuff. We knew that the people who are going to be on this team had to be just deeply passionate about the issue,
Hmm.
you know, even more passionate than us as the founders.
Hmm.
They had to exemplify that they can lead and take that initiative, and then also just be willing to be fully committed and like allocate the necessary time to make sure that we can fully nurture this. We refer to BlackGen as our baby,
Nope.
that they can fully nurture this baby that's growing. So that's definitely, by hands down, most important lesson when building an organization. It depends on the team. Another lesson that I've learned through BlackGen Capital is that, like, this kind of fall. This is a good follow up from the previous lesson. Is that once you have that good team and you have the potential and the capacity to execute, now like you're only limited by your own creativity.
Hmm.
Mm.
You're only limited by your own creativity. All you need to do now is come up with the best ideas and make sure the best ideas win. You know, um, Ray Dalio talks a lot about like radical transparency and radical truth, and I really resonate with those. Like those values when those principles when building
Mm.
our organizations, because that ultimately allows the best ideas to win. Because it's not just it's not like a popularity contest within your executive board. It's more so a meritocracy in that the best ideas, you know, are gonna win, and it's not just, oh, like I'm the president, I'm the co-founder, I have this idea, we should do it like this. No,
Hmm.
from the first day in our meetings, we let the e-board know, like, we're not like your bosses.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not how it is. We're not your boss. We're more so just like helping to facilitate and make sure that we can nurture these ideas from the
Hmm.
ground up.
Got you. For those that don't know, who is Ray Dalio, and what are principles?
Yeah. So Ray Dalio is founder and CEO of Bridgewater Associates. So one of is the largest hedge fund in the world. I think over like 170 billion assets, something like that.
Hmm.
But incredibly smart and talented investor. And so he ultimately packaged together all of the principles and lessons that he's learned while building Bridgewater Associates. And so he packaged it together and called it Principles, one of my favorite books
Mm.
today. And I actually read that thoroughly before co-founding BlackGen,
Hmm.
because I knew it would have just so many gems that would play out incredibly well while making sure that we can succeed and grow.
Yeah, definitely. Abe is always telling me to read that book as well. So it seems to be a common theme.
Yeah, it's a gem. It's a gem.
Right. You mentioned that, BlackGen, you guys saw it as like your baby, and it needs like time. You need to like put in a lot of attention, focus on it, right? But you're a college student, bro. What about school? Like, how do you balance that and like make sure that this is where it's at right now? Like, where do you get the time for that?
Yeah, yeah. I don't think it's about having time. It's more so about making the time.
Mhm.
That's really my big perspective on time management. Like, if an emergency comes up in your life right now, and you're busy for the day, like your schedule's packed, quote unquote,
Yeah.
right? An emergency comes up. What are you gonna do? You're gonna take care of that emergency and allocate the time for it, right?
Mm.
So before looking at that, looking at your schedule, you didn't have time for anything else, but you just made the time to take care of that emergency. And so, in similar vein, while building out BlackGen, I made sure to make the time for it. Although I was a full-time student, had other commitments and priorities, I made sure to make the time for it, and also just vet for a leadership team that could also make the time for it.
Hmm. I think it's interesting because I've seen this firsthand working with you, making time, and that's something we both kind of adopted and really try to do. But let's get a little technical about how you did that. Literally by planning by the hour. Talk a little bit about how that's shaped the way that you approach making time for things in the future.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. So I live by Google Calendar. If it's not on my Google Calendar, then like I'll easily just forget about it. And so I would literally just make time on my Google, map out like time on my calendar whenever I'm free. Sit down with Erm and we plan stuff. You know, Making sure that meetings are transparent for the entire leadership team and having a consistent schedule. I found that really, really key in terms of balance and time management. Even beyond BlackGen Capital, while managing my time I used to have a bad problem with like not knowing or like forgetting to eat or
Yeah.
like forgetting to like go to the gym, things like that. But as soon as you set a physical time
Hmm.
every single day that you do those things, it becomes muscle memory and you have no way around it. And then
Hmm.
it forces you to also make sure that you don't schedule other things during those times that you need to take care of those necessities. And so, like literally mapping out the time to do certain things, like working on blockchain or eating at a certain time or going to the gym.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of me and Abe were talking about budgeting these last 2 weeks, and we were talking about this concept of giving every money a job, every money in your bank account, giving it a job, even if it's
Mm,
saving. That's you're giving it a job. Its job is it's saving, right? So we can apply the same concept here with time. You got to give
yeah,
every time a purpose, a job, and that way you can kind of maneuver it better.
yeah.
Uh,
That's actually a beautiful transition. I don't know. We were initially thinking about talking about budgeting, but I'm actually curious because a lot of people listening probably are trying to get some finance tips from you, or trying to get some investing tips from you, or money management tips from you, to some
Yeah.
degree, right? What is your perspective on money and budgeting and money management?
So my perspective on money, time, and budgeting, I'm big into like investing. So a large amount of my assets are in my brokerage accounts, like being ready to invest. And then I also keep the rest, like a good amount of the remaining amount of assets in my savings account. And then in my checkings account, I just have enough to cover like the month, nothing too Nothing too crazy.
Mhm.
As far as tips, like for those who kind of want to get into investing, I guess the first step if you want to get into investing is you 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 have to figure out, like, you have to, one, be deeply committed to it because this is your actual money that you're investing. When you lose money, it's gonna hurt. And for people who aren't fully committed to learning about investing, you'll just give up right there after you lose some money. But first, figure out your commitment. Two, allocate time to actually conducting self education. I highly recommend, um, you know, YouTube. YouTube is a really good resource. You search up any question,
Mm.
there are going to be investing tips and guides on there. And then also Investopedia. So that really breaks down.
Oh.
It's kind of like another. It's just an encyclopedia that has answers to all of your investing questions, whether it be like what are different strategies I can implement, what what does this mean, what does that mean, how do I do this, what are market conditions, and then third step after getting sort of the technical fundamentals as far as how to invest, then it's figuring out, okay, what to invest in.
Mhm.
That part really depends on just knowledge of the financial markets, staying up to date with the current news, what's going on, and how do those news events impact certain industries, certain sectors, and then ultimately going down to certain companies.
Mhm.
And so, really staying on top of the news. So how? Wall Street Journal. I really like Morning Brew. It summarizes all of the news events in the morning, puts it in a very digestible format.
Mhm.
Robinhood Snacks is also really good. I also like The Economist. That has a little bit more um, like macro facing stuff. And then also, you can't forget, like, there's a lot of good Twitter accounts that have nice information that they can tweet out. So you can just turn on notifications for those accounts and kind of follow what they're doing.
I hope people listening are taking notes. I thought I forgot this was recorded, and I kept thinking to myself, "Oh my god, I need to take notes," because I swear this is like these are good tips, like the websites and the resources that you mentioned as well. Like, definitely appreciate you for dropping those. But I want to talk about Fellow. Both you and Ebenezer, you guys co-founded Fellow, and that's like a whole different experience. It's entrepreneurship. It says the startup world, and I feel like there's a lot we can learn from that. So you guys can go ahead, talk about Fellow, and you can go on from there.
Yeah, we can. Chuck, I
Yeah.
think I always give you this. You want to talk about the story?
The Genesis. Yeah, absolutely. So Fellow, one day Ebenezer and I just came together for dinner. Just chopping it up on the usual. And then we kind of get into the things that we're working on. So I started talking about BlackGen, and how I have so many ideas for that. Ebenezer's talking about breaking it down. And then we realized that with both of these things that we're super passionate about and want to see grow and succeed, we have all these ideas, but it's so hard to execute on them just because of the missing talent
Mm.
that we have. And so we figured, like, why is that like a big problem for us? Like, we were curious to see if it was a similar problem for a lot of other students at Cornell and beyond. And so we automatically just jumped on it, started just chatting with students, seeing if this was a problem that they had, and figuring out if this is something that we could potentially solve.
Mhm.
And so throughout the interviews, we did learn that students had trouble like pursuing their passions and working on side projects. And one of the reasons that was very common was just being able to find people.
Mm.
And so after that, I guess I can pass it to Abe to kind of talk about what were the next steps.
Yeah. I think, when we first even started with this, Cheick and I, we kind of had our own experiences starting things, but nothing like a business, nothing like a startup that's trying to tackle this big problem that people are out there having. And, it's not just making something, it's making something that is sustainable, which means it has a money aspect to it, which means you're actually impacting people. And so, just as a precursor to everything that I'm going to say, these are all lessons that we learned throughout this process, and I think it's because we jumped into this and we kind of took a leap of faith, and we're curious to learn that we have developed a good amount of experience in those arenas and kind of developed these experiences. Um, when we first started, and when we went through this whole process, we made a lot of mistakes, and that was the beauty of it. I think that we learned a lot in
But
terms of
also lessons and gems.
exactly, not even in terms of business and entrepreneurship, but in terms of ourselves, in terms of um, doing things outside of class, managing that, working with people, um, and honestly,
Lessons.
hiring students, and everything along that. But to make it short and sweet, this was around this time last year, and around the time that BlackGen was also getting started. And so after kind of identifying this problem, we went ahead and we put together this MVP, non technical MVP. So there was no code aspect to it. It was just using what existed out there, resources that we can easily put together. That was a Slack, Airtable, and
Our website.
Airtable and a website, Wix. And we put that together in a matter of like a week, threw that out there. And in almost a week and a half, we had over 670 students sign up from over 50 plus universities. And that was like a big, like, yo, this is actually interesting. Maybe we should pursue this a little bit more, dive into it. And then we went ahead and kind of found people to work with, which in itself was ironic because Fello was
Yeah.
to help people find people to work with. And we ended up using Fello to do that too, actually. So the people that we did find were part of our community. And Cheick, you want to talk a little bit about the experience kind of working with people, some of the lessons that we learned in that process?
Yeah, yeah, we had a crazy summer. One of the biggest, I guess, lessons just throughout the whole fellow experience was just learning how to build a team, learning how to lead a team, and make sure that we can actually execute as a team.
Hmm.
We made we fell into some pitfalls at the beginning, like unnecessarily hiring and like unnecessarily accepting interns.
Mm.
And so unfortunately we had to like cut some of those interns very short after we realized that.
That's even hard. It's the hard thing to do.
Yeah, it was tough. It was very tough because like we were at first we were super excited about having interns on the
Yeah.
team. They
Hmm.
were excited to work with us. They were deeply passionate. But then Abe and I came to like several realizations, like, okay, like we don't actually need an intern for this position.
Mm.
We don't need a person for that. And so we had some really tough conversation. But however, the interns that we did, keep throughout the semester, we were able to throughout the summer, we were able to just learn along the journey as to how to really manage a team, how to lead a team. We learned. I truly learned the importance of just leadership, and
Mm.
it's not really about being someone's boss. That's not what leadership is at all. in fact, it's probably the complete opposite. It's working for your teammates,
Mm,
being able to support them and empower them, encourage them to
Hmm.
get things done and help them out throughout that process.
Hmm.
So that was a really big revelation that I personally had, and I see that, shaping out, all of my future, like, endeavors.
Definitely. I think another thing that we really learned throughout that process um, is consistency. And I think you kind of mentioned that earlier. But consistency in meetings, consistency and checking in with people, consistency and yeah, and it's like it might seem like you can let people go off and do whatever they want type of thing, but it's extremely important to be there along the way. And
mm,
that's what Shek was just talking about, leadership, like literally being there along the way, but also giving them room to breathe and things like that. When I say being there is like being available and making sure
yeah.
you're creating time for them. And so throughout the summer, we spent a good amount of time just with the team. Um, Not even strategizing, not even thinking about the future, not even doing customer discovery, but literally checking in with the team. We had meetings every day with all the teams. We had um, all these things that were, in a way, really helping us build a team, and in another way, pulling us from the exact job that we were supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so that's where we kind of lost clarity in the way that we were going about executing. And Chuck and I had this really good perspective and culture where we wanted to make sure that everyone felt um, at home, as if this was a family, which it was, and we did a really great job of doing that.
Mhm.
But in that process, we kind of made a good amount of mistakes where the amount of people making decisions, kind of having input, um, made our vision a lot less clear.
Yeah,
And
for
so
sure.
I think that was a very big lesson that we kind of took away from that.
Wait,
Um,
so that means like a lot of people were involved in making those decisions. Was that the mistake? Like, what was the mistake?
Yeah, so kind of like, we kind of opened the the ideating process to every team,
Mm,
even if they are not as necessarily directly involved with, that, like, element.
mm,
And so that's where a lot of ideas were getting thrown around, is getting very jumbled, and that's what Abe was talking about when we lost a little bit of clarity.
mm,
It's very difficult.
mhm,
And so, we quickly realized, like, in terms of the decision making process, we pretty much just needed to kind of slim down just a little bit, and really focus on not ideating too much, making sure that we can also execute on
mhm,
the ideas that came up.
It's really interesting because as leaders, it kind of requires you to, like you guys mentioned earlier, um, stoop low, get really involved with everyone, but at the same time, kind of detach and also to make decisions. So it's like you have to do a lot of things. Like it's not a simple straight road. It's like left, right, up, down, and that's kind of what I'm getting from this.
Yeah, yeah. Kind of going off of that, it's all about kind of being able to have a narrow scope in terms of being able to look at the details, but then also taking a step back to widen that scope and look at the grand vision.
mhm,
And so, it got to a point where Abe and I were more so very narrow in terms of the details and kind of working with the team.
Mm,
But then we realized that we quickly needed to widen our scope a little bit and look at the grand picture. So
mhm,
we would actually have these, like, weekly meetings every single week, just literally sit down and just break down what happened last week, break down where are we heading in terms of direction and future, and how are we going to get there. What are things that we need to change? What are
mm,
things that us as, leaders of this org need to change, and what are also what are things that our teammates and organizational things that we need to change as well.
Definitely. And I know we're kind of running down on time, but uh, to kind of put the cherry on top of this, to some degree, what we found extremely useful was emotionally detached feedback throughout this process. Like Shek said, when you're building things from the bottom, it's your little baby. You're nurturing it. You're putting a lot of barriers around and kind of trying to navigate this world of building a company, which in itself is extremely intricate, and it requires a lot of emotional attachment. And that's where the passion comes. That's where the energy comes from. And so in that process, you can be blocked off from ideas, blocked off from different perspectives. And so we actively sought people with experience in these fields, not just anyone, not just Jack from the street or anything like that, but people with experience in this area that have gone through these processes that can give us insight. And those people included some of our mentors and close advisors like Rami, Jaron. And then later on, when school came about, we went ahead and applied to eLab, which is the student accelerator program here at Cornell. So for all you entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs that are trying to get into entrepreneurship, into the world of business and starting a company from bottom, you should definitely look into the eLab accelerator program. And not even just that, if you're interested in learning about this process, definitely check out the eLab classes. For Certus, NBA 6230, MBA 6330, they literally walk you through the steps of where an idea starts and how you build a team around it and how you execute. That's where we currently are. And it's been an interesting journey so far. But I think it will be a nice time to transition onto the future. Check, you have this beautiful way of looking at goals and its visions. So talk a little bit about your visions for the future and some of the things you're currently doing to achieve those.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of I like to look at visions just because I feel like in a sense like if I'm looking out 5 years from now, it's very difficult to set actual goals because the future is so uncertain. However, broader visions that can serve as guidance and like help build a path, it is a lot more just like practical for me personally. And so one of my visions, I guess, is to just be at like I guess I'll talk about 5 years from now. Like one of my visions, hopefully, is to be working at like a hedge fund, being able to pitch investment ideas to teams and ultimately just really wake up every single day, go to work, and just enjoy what I do. Um, and I think as of now, that is the hedge fund route because I wake up every day to this day, 7:30, 7 a.m. Go to the gym, come back, start doing research on different stocks and stuff like that, getting ready for the trading day. I already do that for fun, and so if I could do that as a career, that'd be so just fulfill very satisfying, and I really enjoy it. My second vision is just to continue having those, you know, really having a strong inner circle. Continuing those relationships that I've built from Cornell, and just having genuine relationships with those people in my inner circle who can be there for me, motivate me. I also, return those in exchange. And then my third is just family. Family is really important to me. Um, I want to be at a place where, I can just like wake up every day and know that my whole family is good, my whole family's okay. Nothing's really bothering them, and we're just at, a good place in terms of our relationship with each other. And my last thing, I know I said three, but I'm gonna cheat a little bit. My fourth vision is like I feel like in 2025, the world's gonna be so different.
Mm.
But I know that one thing will remain consistent. I know that at 25, I'll be at a point where I can look back and say, okay, like I've done these things, which is great, but there's so much more that I can do, and I mean that in terms of not just in terms of career advancement and like professional goals, but more so in terms of giving back to my community and helping build those back up.
Hmm.
Communities, not just in South Bronx, Harlem, but also in West Africa, Mali, just to really like make some progress towards sparking generational change and providing access to resources and the tools that we just have been deprived of for so long. Um, so I guess those are my four visions. I'm really optimistic. Abe, you already know this about me, but I'm just a super optimistic person. I like just thinking about the future and really looking at the upsides, but also just not forgetting the downsides too, but just really enjoying the fruits and what life has to offer.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, I like the this idea of visions. You mentioned it last time we talked as well, and even after our conversation, I was telling Abe how that's a really smart way of looking at it because, like you said, you don't know the future, so you can't make like exact steps. You can't plan exact steps, goals, but you know the destination. You know where you want to be at. You know the vision. That's the vision,
Exactly.
and any way I go about it um, if I know that's what I'm going is works, and it's a really smart way of looking at it.
Something I actually think is important with visions and goals to begin with is accountability too. And I've seen myself with accountability kind of change in the way that I kind of find that. And the reason that with kind of everything that I do, I have a co-founder, a co-partner, a co whatever is it's extremely well in keeping you accountable. I
Mhm.
can't tell you how many times working on Fellow or working on things like that, you feel emotionally detached or you feel tired and you're trying to move on type of thing, and it's been extremely valuable, kind of having someone there that's on that same vibe, kind of understands the vision,
Mhm.
the mission, the goals, and how to get there. So, like along with visions, I think it's extremely important to have the accountability piece, which I've personally gone through, making
Mhm.
sure I surround myself with people that are just as accountable or are visionaries.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah, in terms of accountability, I I like to look at the vision and like how I'm gonna feel once I like am in that vision and have that have it kind of achieve those things. And then, so that kind of serves as just motivation in itself, just because I know how hungry and determined I am to get to that vision.
Mhm,
It's just a matter of doing these things to get there.
mhm,
So the accountability really builds off of
mhm.
passion plus the vision that I can ultimately just put together to get there.
So, we're at a nice place. What else you guys want to cover? We got like 5 more minutes.
Like 5 minutes. When we were talking about Fellow, you guys talked about the first stage of customer discovery and stuff like that,
Mm,
and I wanted to actually emphasize on that point because I know how much work you guys put
uh-huh.
in, and it wasn't like a simple interview. Like, how many people did you guys like talk to every week? And it was like a very time consuming, straining process.
Mm,
Um, I was trying to slide that in, but everything else that was mentioned was kind of interesting too.
yeah,
So just left it.
yeah. We talked to over like 80 students in our initial round. I wouldn't say it was taxing. It was fun. Like Abe and I, like we really enjoyed it because we were reaching out to just random people,
Hmm.
um, who were 2, 3 connections away or on LinkedIn,
Hmm.
and just people who were doing interesting stuff. So having these interviews with them, but we were also just getting to know them and building relationships. We had quite a good amount of interesting combos, to say the
But
least.
I think honestly that was really enjoyable. Like I think a lot of customer discovery, a lot of people might and it is actually extremely taxing because you're taking a lot of time out of your day, you're asking the same questions, type of thing. But the twist that I think Cheick and I kind of put on that is just we were extremely laid back. You know, we asked the questions that we needed to along those lines, but the question we even asked was like those were just trying to get to know the people to begin with, because that's important in customer discovery.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and something I took out of the whole thing is like, reach out to people, they'll respond. Like the people make the time out of the day to get back to you. People will hop on a 30-minute call out of nowhere. So you know, like this initial fear of even being social and finding someone that's out there and doing something incredibly complex, and you think like, oh my god, this person is doing this. You never know. You know, we've chatted with people that are doing some incredibly awesome things on their own at all these different universities, like almost like 50 plus universities, and it's like just within that, even if it wasn't for Fello, like that's value right there. Like that's value right there, and like you wouldn't have the accountability or the motivation to kind of do it. But I think customer discovery can be looked at in a way of no matter where this goes, we're building connections, we're networking with people, we're meeting interesting people that we'd never have the opportunity to.
Yeah, that's a valuable experience for sure.
So let's give a little outro. So you wanna take this one, Mo?
Well, that's I think that's about it. We've had a very great, interesting, deep conversation. Cheick, thank you for joining us. This is definitely not going to be at least I hope the last time we have you here. Because we can't cover everything in an hour. We definitely have to talk more. Your any other progress that you make with BlackGen or with investing, we'll definitely talk about that more.
Yeah, honestly, it was fully my pleasure. I really enjoyed just being on this, and I'm really looking forward to just getting deeper and deeper on the next episodes of breaking it down.
Yes, sir. Well, Cheick, I think a lot of people are kind of thinking about ways of contacting you, kind of getting in touch with you. What are some of the ways that people could reach out and possibly connect?
Yeah, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, of course, Cheick Camara. Feel free to follow me on the gram, Cheick underscore me out. Feel free to, my email is cc2344 at cornell.edu. So feel free to reach out, down the chat and just, help out however I can.